Picture this: Sherlock Holmes, the master of logic, the man who reads the world like it's a personal diary, is beaten not by a criminal mastermind, but by a woman, a single photograph, a clever ruse, and the greatest detective in London finds himself outmaneuvered. Now, you might be wondering, how does the most perfect reasoning machine on Baker Street get bested? Let me take you back to the brisk streets of Victorian London, where a certain Irene Adler, an opera singer shrouded in intrigue, becomes the woman, the only one Holmes can never forget. Holmes, utterly devoid of romantic sentiment, treats emotion like grit in a microscope, something to be avoided at all costs. Yet, Irene Adler, through wit and audacity, shakes his perfectly balanced mind. Ever hear the phrase, game recognizes game? Well, even Holmes knew when he'd met his match. But here's the setup. Holmes is approached by a desperate king, a scandal threatening to topple a dynasty. The weapon? Not a dagger or poison, but a cabinet photograph, a symbol of Victorian duplicity and technological progress rolled into one. So, why does this matter? Because it's not just a story of blackmail or espionage. It's a drama about power, perception, and the unexpected turns when one underestimates their opponent. And as Holmes will discover, the psychological duel can be more dangerous than any chase through foggy alleys. Let's unravel how a woman's intuition and the threat of exposure can rattle even the most unemotional intellect in London, and why, for Holmes, Irene Adler is forever the woman. Ever imagine what kind of secrets keep kings up at night? Not wars or treaties, but love letters and photographs. That's exactly what brings the disguised king of Bohemia, decked out in astrakhan and a flaming jewel, to Holmes' fog-shrouded door. He's got a scandal so volatile, it could set Europe ablaze. Now, you might be thinking, why doesn't he just send the palace guards? Here's the conflict. This isn't a matter for brute force or the bumbling official police. The king needs discretion, stealth, cunning, and someone who can read a note's watermark as easily as a headline. That's forensic analysis, Victorian style. Holmes, with Watson at his side, breaks down clues from paper fibers, that's provenance, to the syntax of a foreign hand, deducing the sender's origins and intent. Technical term, deduction, not guesswork, but the art of extracting certainty from chaos. Their mission? Retrieve a photograph evidence of the king's entanglement with Irene Adler, now a ticking time bomb since he's set to marry a Scandinavian princess. The stakes? Not just heartbreak, but international fallout. When royalty turns to a consulting detective, the case isn't just about solving a puzzle, it's about preserving the pillars of power. And as Holmes notes, sometimes the world's most important problems hinge on the tiniest, most personal details. Now, let me pull back the curtain on a classic Holmes trick, disguise. Holmes doesn't just investigate, he becomes the investigation. This time, he shapeshifts from a drunken groom to a benevolent clergyman, each persona meticulously crafted. Why? Because sometimes seeing isn't observing. Holmes uses these roles as reconnaissance technology, his version of surveillance, complete with psychological camouflage. Ever hear about social engineering? Holmes uses it before it's even a buzzword, earning trust, extracting gossip from stable hands, and reconstructing Irene's daily routine. He gathers intelligence on her suitors, her habits, even her locks, because in detective work, physical security is only as strong as the human mind behind it. Now, you might be asking, why not just break in? But Holmes knows secrets are safest where we least expect, often hidden in plain sight. Holmes stages an elaborate street fight, fakes an injury, and leverages human instinct, the irresistible urge to protect what we value most. In this act, conflict isn't with guns or fists, but with wits, a battle of anticipation. Holmes relies on cognitive psychology. He knows that under stress, people reveal what's priceless to them. That's behavioral profiling, 19th century style. The resolution? Holmes discovers where the photograph is hidden, yet in a twist. Irene Adler is already a step ahead. The hunter becomes the hunted, as Holmes learns that subterfuge is a two-way street. Let me tell you a story of the ultimate plot twist. Just when Holmes believes he's won, Irene Adler flips the script. She escapes London, leaving behind a letter that reads like a mic drop. Why does this revelation sting Holmes more than any criminal's escape? Because Irene anticipated each move, even donning a male disguise to shadow Holmes as he left her home. Now, you might ask, how did she pull it off? Simple. Adaptability. Irene leverages performance her skills as an actress and situational awareness, a technical term for reading your opponent and conditions in real time. She recognizes Holmes' methods and turns them against him. In her farewell, there's grace and mercy. She keeps the photograph not for blackmail, but for protection her insurance policy, a concept as vital today as it was then. Holmes, defeated not by villainy, but by virtue, is left holding only a memento. Irene's own portrait, gifted as a token of respect. Let's pause on this. Holmes, for all his calculation, realizes the heart of deduction is respecting the unknown, the X factor of human ingenuity. Irene's triumph is a masterclass in information asymmetry, outmaneuvering even the world's best strategist. Resolution doesn't mean victory in the classic sense. Sometimes, the greatest lesson comes from recognizing when you've been outplayed and tipping your hat to an adversary who's become, in Holmes's words, the woman. So, what's the real takeaway from the case of Irene Adler and the King's scandal? It's not just about clever sleuthing or aristocratic intrigue, but the unpredictability of the human heart. Holmes learns that logic alone can't always account for love, pride, or mercy, those wild cards that make us human. You might be thinking, isn't detection just deduction plus data? Not quite. Holmes's greatest challenge isn't a locked door or a cryptic letter, but the variable of character, what motivates someone to hide, reveal, forgive, or flee. That's what modern forensics now calls the human element, and it can override even the tightest logical chain. This story echoes in every detective's journey. What begins as a technical puzzle morphs into a study of psychology and ethics. Holmes, ever the keen observer, is forced to confront the limits of his own method. Emotional intelligence, empathy, even humility, these become as crucial as fingerprints or footprints. Here's the resolution. The photograph, once a threat, becomes a symbol of respect. The king is spared, Irene disappears, and Holmes gains not a trophy, but a lesson. Sometimes, the most brilliant solution is knowing when to let go. As you reflect on this adventure, remember, in every mystery, the mind seeks order, but it's the heart that holds the final key. And as Holmes would say, it's a capital mistake to theorize before one has data, especially the data of the unpredictable, ingenious human soul.